simple points, because God forbid that I should stand between you and your Sunday. So 5 simple points here, but I've been doing a little study on Nehemiah. I'm not sure, I'm not sure why, if maybe just for me, but just something I want to point out tonight. And I want to start by reading Psalm 79, which should be marked with the blue sticker. You see that there? Just look for the blue sticker in your Bible. That's what's marked in mine. Psalm 79, verse number 4. You know why I do that? It's not, Brother Michael, that I couldn't find the Psalms. I probably could, you know what I'm saying? Like, even on a bad night, I could probably hit the Psalms somewhere and then locate chapter 79. But I have this reoccurring dream, and I'm being very serious now. I have this, this is serious, Justin. I have this reoccurring dream that I'm getting up to preach and I cannot find my text. I mean, it plagues me. What does that mean, Ben? It plagues me. I get up here and I have this dream, and I'm preaching all over different places, and I get up and I do the introductory. Do you ever have this dream, Nathan? I'm serious. Did you ever dream? You dream that? You're odd. So I have this dream that I get up and I cannot find my text. And I'm preaching in all manner of places, and so I go through the introductory comments, and they say it's good to have Pastor Sehmish here, and it must be this nerve thing, And then I'm like, please turn to, and in the end of the dream, 2 people walk up, take me by my arms and escort me down. Isn't that awful? Now, when I was a kid, I used to dream that I went to school in my pajamas. Did anyone, be honest, did anyone ever dream you went to school? Come on, I see your hand. See, now that's not abnormal. People do dream that. So what I do, I just mark my text in case, that it happens. I get up here and I cannot find the Psalms. Alrighty. Do you have greater confidence in me now, having said all that to you? Psalm 79, verse number 4. We are become a reproach to our neighbours, a scorn and derision to them that are round about us. How long, Lord, wilt thou be angry forever? Shall thy jealousy burn like fire? Pour out thy wrath upon the heathen that have not known thee, and upon the kingdoms that have not called upon thy name. For they have devoured Jacob and laid waste his dwelling place. Now, this psalm points to the overrun of Jerusalem. This is a prophetic psalm, and it points to the destruction of Jerusalem, to the heathen overrunning that city, to the walls and the gates being burned down, and the nation, the people being in reproach. That's the thought there. The heathen have overrun the city. And in Isaiah 60, which is the green marker, in Isaiah 60 and verse number 18, these are just kind of tying in the thought I want to give you. Isaiah 60 and verse 18, then I will go to Nehemiah 2, says, 18, violence shall no more be heard in thy land, wasting nor destruction within thy borders. And I want you to notice this statement, please. But thou shalt call thy walls salvation and thy gates praise. So you see there the importance of the walls and the gates and the city. Now in Nehemiah chapter 2 and verse number 17, and Nehemiah, if you're not familiar with Nehemiah lived after the destruction of Jerusalem, and Nehemiah himself was in captivity, possibly second generation captivity, meaning that he'd possibly come in, or his parents had come in, and he was born in captivity. And Nehemiah obviously has a burden for his own people, for Jerusalem, and he's questioned about his countenance. And he says in verse number 17, then said I unto them, you see the distress that we are in, how Jerusalem lieth waste, and he's talking to the group now, and the gates thereof are burned with fire. Come and let us build up the wall of Jerusalem, that we be no more a reproach. And do you see the connection there all the time between the walls and the gates, and when they're not there, you're a reproach? and the other nations scorned you. And you have to sort of enter a little bit into the historical setting to see the point of that. A city was defined by its security, its walls, its gates. And so to not have that, well, you weren't anything. A great nation had great cities. A great nation had great walled cities. A great people had great cities. So to not have that was to just be a reproach, to be scorned by others is, well, what are you? And of course, what had happened was, and this is my first statement, that in the glory days of the blessing of God on the nation, they had walls and gates. Jerusalem was a place to boast of, and they had all that. And what had happened was that sin had come within, and the corruption and the sin. And what was the sin? The sin was to disregard the laws and the commands that God had given the people, and it included many areas. It wasn't just about personal sin. It was about personal sin, but it wasn't just about personal sin. It was about how they treated each other. It was about what the rich were doing to the poor. It was about how the widows were being neglected. It was just contrary to everything God told them they were supposed to be. It was about the altars they were erecting and the gods they were going after. It was lots of things. And so as they were sort of getting corrupted from within, now for a time the walls and the city was all there, and God was warning of imminent destruction. And then it reached a point where it was like, okay, now it's not a warning, it's a prophecy, it's going to happen. And there's nothing you can do to turn it back at this point. So the glory days had the walls and the gates, and to look at that was for them to say, what in Isaiah 60 said, thou shalt call thy walls salvation and thy gates praise. So to look at Jerusalem in the glory days of the blessing was to say, look what God has given. Look, these walls, these gates. And you have to sort of, again, get the historical context to understand how important that was to them and how that was just tied entirely to the blessing of God. Now, statement number 2 is this. When we think of walls, and remember that our task in the study here is to draw application for the present. So we understand the historical context, and we want to understand the historical context because we want to make sure that we see that first, and then from that we want to draw the practical, well, what does that mean to me? So if we get the picture wrong, we might get the application wrong. So the historical background helps us to get the right picture. So we ask, what was the significance of walls? What was the importance of gates? How was that tied to them? In what way did that indicate a blessing? How did they see that? Was that God's favour? How was that God's favour? So having understood that that was the favour of God, now we draw application and we say, what does that speak of? Because we understand the book of Romans says, whatsoever things were written aforetime were written for our learning. So we say this is something that was written aforetime, this was written for our learning. So we look at it, and what you see here is that when you see this concept of walls, walls speak of a defined boundaries that offered protection and certainties. Walls speak of defined boundaries that offered protection and certainties. That's what the walls were. Now, every institution or anything that God has anything to do with has some walls. And walls are the clear, defined boundaries that are given to protect the people who dwell within. I hope I'm choosing my words carefully. I want you to understand that. Because some people see walls as things that stop you doing something. Some people look at walls and go, the only walls I think of are like prison walls. They stop you doing something. But that's not the thought of the walls. And I'll tell you, and I'll give you a key thought in a moment why God's walls are not that way. The concept here is that the walls are the boundaries that God puts in our life and in every institution that He brings that says, stay within these boundaries. Within here lies protection and blessing. And these walls are given to you. So in the same way He gave the ancients literal walls, He gives us certain defined boundaries and says, look, stay within this. These things are for your protection, and that you're safe while you're here. And again, like any good thought, you can trace it right back to the beginning. Adam was given some boundaries. Adam had some walls, not in the sense of a city wall, but more like us. Adam's walls were, look, within the walls you can eat any of the tree, but don't cross the boundary to partaking of that tree. That's outside the rules. And so, of course, Adam did. When God birthed the nation of Israel and brought them into being through the line of Abraham, God gives them, through Moses, statutes and laws and commandments and what is sometimes called testimonies that were the walls of the nation. And before the nation had literal walls in their cities, they had these boundaries and these spiritual walls that God gave them. And if you look at the laws of God, if you study this in the Bible, you find that they encompass many areas of life. So whilst the whole law is summed up in the commandments, we say the 10 Commandments, there are many laws that God gave them as a nation. Laws to do with how your social structure of the country had to be, because it was the nation that God was going to bring to be. So God said, you don't invent these things. I said to someone the other day, they made a comment about at home. I said, in my home, I'm the king sitting on the throne of my kingdom. And I get to make the rules in my home. And I said that in this sense, I get to decide what kind of kingdom will exist in my home. And I was saying, in our kingdom, the kingdom that I rule over, we've decided that we will be a kingdom where even a word like shut up will not come into our house. We've decided that. Now, I'm not telling, but I'm just explaining, because I'm sitting on a throne, figuratively speaking, and I get to define the kingdom that I rule over. I get to decide what will be the environment of the home to which I have authority. What kind of place will this be? What will be the spirit? What will be the attitude that will prevail in this home? I will make certain rules about how we will treat each other in this home, how we will speak to each other in this home. And I get to do that because I'm shaping the kingdom, and yes, the home is a reflection of me. Now, God brought a nation into being, and God wanted a nation to be the reflection of Him. So He didn't just let them sort of invent what they wanted. He said, this is what you've got to do. Because I'm a God of mercy, you've got to be a people of mercy. So you've got to have laws that will project mercy. So you will not discard the weak in your society. When you glean your fields, by command, you will leave certain amounts for the widows and the poor. You will build in a social security system within your society. You will not defraud each other. You will not loan to each other and charge exorbitant interest rates. You will not do that. You will not borrow from your neighbour and not return it again. And God gave them all these laws and many moral and many laws about their society. And what those things were, they were the walls that were encompassing the nation. And those walls were protecting them. They were the boundaries that were going to ensure their prosperity and their increase and their happiness and their success. They were not prison walls. They were walls to hedge in their happiness. And so God gave them that. Now, what happened was, from that, they then became literally a strong nation. From having the starting point, before they had walled cities, they had spiritual walls and moral walls and social walls. All of that was given from, listen to me, the order is very important. If you'll just understand this, you're going to be smarter than a lot of people in this country right now. From the spiritual, moral laws and walls that were established, a people who had nothing firstly became great within. I'm choosing my words carefully. Became great within. Then they became great without. And then they moved from having walls of these laws that God gave to having literal walls. which represented great conquest and great prosperity, and nobody stood before them. The one led to the other. Now, I'd like to just chat with you, but I'm not going to bog down too much here, but I have observed. So, Pastor, what have you seen? Listen to me. I've observed, and I look at people. If I study people, I've observed that great people, long before they had external greatness, they had great sense of inner walls and boundaries that they had set up, and they adhered to that inwardly, and then that manifested itself in outward greatness. Do you understand that? They firstly decided on what their inner... Now, what we think, all of us are prone to do this, we want the easy way. What we want what greatness gives, but we don't want the steps that have to be taken to achieve greatness. We're looking for an easy path to greatness. And there is never an easy path to greatness. Because it doesn't matter. And what we think is, well, I can convince people I've got it together. But you can't convince God because He knows already. So you're continually thwarted at your attempts because God sees who you really are. And He's not nasty about that, but it's just that you've got to take care of this first before you can get to there. And so that's always, and listen to me, you've got to understand this. I could really get practical here. You've really got to set in place some sense of order and walls and boundaries in your life and in your family as much as you can to allow yourself to move on. It's disorderly when you don't mow your lawn. You say, is this church? Is this the gardening show? What is this? It's disorderly. It's an evidence that you prevail over a disorderly kingdom. It's disorderly when you don't pay your bills. It's disorderly when you don't return your phone calls. Oh, I feel guilty now. Let's change the subject. It's disorderly. What I'm saying is listen to, I'm trying to help you here. It's disorderly when you don't turn up on time to things. It's disorderly when you have to carve a pathway through your house to get to the next room. It's disorderly. It's disorderly when you dress the wrong button, done up with the wrong button, and you don't care. You project disorder. And it has nothing to do with your financial status. It's got nothing to do with how much money you do or do not have. But when you don't put anything in place in your own life, when you're constantly a person who doesn't complete your assignments on time and works as a matter of course to all the time be pushing the boundaries, well, you've got to understand that just shouts things about you. And it doesn't matter that it shouts it to people, which it does. It's more important is what God sees. When you go on holidays and so you don't render your tithes and offerings to the Lord. Those kind of things. Just all the little bits and pieces that contribute to you're just disorderly. When you keep signing yourself up for debt, when you can't pay the debt you've got, it's disorderly. When you make excuses to do they were just based on things that they decided to do. But here's what they did. In keeping those principles of self, they empowered themselves with a certain inner strength. Do you understand that? They were not battling an inner integrity problem. Every time you tell yourself you're going to do something and every time you don't do it, your self starts to not believe yourself anymore. And that wars against you. When you want to do something, self no longer believes in you. And you have huge self-doubt. Because you say, I'm always starting things and not finishing them. I'm always saying I'm going to do it and I don't do it. And after a while, your self starts to say, you know what, you don't finish anything. Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm trying to help you here. I'm trying to grow you through something here. Now, some of you already got this, but I'm not preaching in a way to condemn you. I'm really trying to help you understand a principle here. that you've got to get those sort of things together. Now, it is not the sum total of all of life. There are some very orderly, organised people who have some other major faults they're not seeing. It's not like this is the only thing, but it's a very important thing. It should concern you if you have inner walls and boundaries that keep getting broken down. It's very important to sort of set a course for getting that in order. So first of all, they got those things in order. Then they literally became a great nation. But after, what you see is you see the circle come around. They went from being disorderly and everyone doing that which is right in their own sight. There are people like that. There are a few here. You know, that nobody's going to tell you what to do with anything. You're going to challenge every convention. I was talking about a preacher the other day to another preacher. I love to, talk to him. Anyway, I was talking about a preacher the other day, and I said, and both of these guys are good friends, and I said, brother so-and-so, I said, well, you talk to him about it, you'll be surprised what he says. And he said, oh, I didn't know. I said, yeah, ask him. I said, he's got some really unusual / strange views on such and such a doctrine. And he said, really? I said, yeah. I said, and when he told me, I said to him, brother, that flies in the face of 2,000 years of historical Christian thought. And he said, I guess it does. Now, what I'm saying is when you are the person who always has to invent the new thing, you've got to question what's going on there. Do you understand what have I not communicated this? If you suddenly come up with a new view about the end times that is completely at odds with 2,000 years of historical faith, there's a possibility you've got this wrong. If you suddenly come up with this view that, well, I don't think the church is really of value anymore. I think really we all just need to be little home groups, and and you suddenly want to overturn historical Christianity, you might have it wrong. When people try to tell you something, you challenge everything. There are people who challenge things because their nature is to challenge things, whether they agree or not. They're just that way. And what it is, it's a spirit. I'm choosing that word. It's a spirit. It's a dark spirit that inhabits some, who have a spirit that has to, this spirit believes anything organised is evil. Anything of institution must be wrong. Anything structured is oppressive. And it's a spirit that challenges that. And it gave birth to the hippie movement and a whole heap of other things historically. People who have not contributed, but who just wanted to tear down and yet didn't have anything to offer in its place. Now, I'm just saying that what you've got to do is establish within yourself just some boundaries and principles you're going to abide by and work on those. And I'm not asking you to judge anyone else. I'm not asking you to judge me, and I won't judge you. But I'm saying that you've got to work on that and understand that set some things in place. You should decide, teenagers, to keep your room tidy because it's the right thing to do. Instead of, I have to keep my room tidy because, I'm watching the mum patience meter is about reaching it's in the red, it's flashing. And any moment, I know where this leads to. So this is the point to quickly tidy and pull the meter back a little bit. But that's not the reason to do it. You should say it's godly and it's Christ-like to be orderly. And we don't have to be sterile, but we need to be orderly. And so I should want to do that because that reflects what's appropriate. You see there's a difference because you choose to do it. You should just decide some things because that's the sort of person you want to be. You should decide, I don't want to be a person who's always living on the wrong side of the line. I don't want to be a person who says, how close to the cliff can I walk before I fall? I'd just rather be a person who stays here. I don't want to live my life there all the time. And it's just a different approach. And by setting in place those things, you're preparing yourself for the next steps. But without that, you can't. Statement number 3 is when the walls are in disrepair, the sins that led to the captivity remain the same. Now, what you'll find in the book of Nehemiah, as you look at this was very interesting, I thought, is that the same sins that led to the breaking down of the walls and then the captivity, and captivity is a loss of freedom. You ever watch someone who's blown their mind on drugs? And they're not hard to find. You know what? They lose a whole lot of things that they never can get back. They become they just get into a certain bracket and that's it for them. They become dropouts, unable to really think, they don't contribute. They become the people who burden other people all the time. Now, they opted to get into drugs, to get a thrill, to feel good, to pleasure self for a time. And now, everybody else has to pay the price of being around them. And nobody wants to. Usually their mothers tolerate them. Good for you that you have a mother who loves you when you are a leech on society. Good for you that you have God who loves you and a God of mercy who will give you a new beginning if you choose it, but most of you don't. But what I'm saying is people who when you break down the walls, the sin that was just remains. And you have to rebuild some walls in your life to start purging out those things. So you look in the book of Nehemiah and you find that the same people who are oppressing the poor and going against the needy and causing all those things that God was grieved about, and mark it down, God is grieved about that. Don't think God doesn't care about that. Don't think God doesn't care about the way you treat people. There are not many sins that equate to that. There are many sins that one does against self that are sins, but then there's an altogether different category about how you treat somebody else. Don't think that's not a big one for God. And here were these people who were still treating people bad, and what Nehemiah had to do was say, look fellas, this has to stop. First of all, he started rebuilding the walls, and then it's around about chapter 8, he gets to a place where he says, we have to purge these things out. These things cannot remain here. These were the things that led us into captivity. They're still here. And that always, always happens. You have to rebuild the walls. You know, I've seen churches, and I say this by observation. I've seen churches that once were really good and doing a pretty great job. And they got ruined because a sort of corruption got within and a sin. And the sin that got within was not that some one person was immoral in the church. That never destroys the church. It wasn't that someone fell into sin. You know, that's simplistic. That wasn't what destroyed the church. What destroyed the church was the attitude and the spirit of the members and the way they started treating each other. And so I've seen churches that were strong and great, and I won't name them because things go out beyond just here. But then all of that, all the rot set in, and they lost everything they had. The walls all got broken down. And here's what happens. Listen to me. I'll tell you the cycle. Then many of the members get carried into captivity. So the churches diminish greatly in their numbers. And many of the people who were there in the great days no longer go to church anywhere. And the efforts are right down to nothing. Now, the problem is, when I look at some of those churches, the same sins that brought them to captivity are still present. So what was present with 150 is still present with 15. So there is an inability to ever move beyond until you correct that. When I came here 10 years ago, and I set in course some decisions and set about wall building, part of that was to say the things that have held us back in the past will no longer be able to continue. And some of you were here in those early days. And if you think I'm a little harsh tonight, I'm a pussycat compared to what I used to be. In fact, I'm embarrassed about some of the things I used to say. I really am. I mean, I used to say things I feel embarrassed to tell you. I think I was a bit mean-spirited. I used to say in services, now turn around. That's the exit down there. If you don't like it, you know where the door is. I mean, that's what I'd say. And people would go, and we just, and you know what? Some people did. Some people said, oh, you know, I'm going to huff and puff and blow your house down. But they left, huffed and puffed, and you know, like a balloon deflating. They went. And they went. It was okay. I think God used the harshness that was probably inappropriate, but it achieved a certain end. I remember saying, now, some of you, I said this 2 weeks after I got to church, some of you, you have gossiped against this church, you have gossiped against the leadership. And I was only there 2 weeks. And I was referring to what had gone on before. And this has to stop. And if I hear another comment about you tearing this church down or tearing down the direction of this church, you are not staying here anymore. I'm going to come and, now half of you are going to think, oh, I'm going to come to your home and I'm going to put you out of the church. And I said, don't test my resolve in this matter. And people, sure enough, the first week after I said it, wouldn't you know it, somebody did. So I rang up one of the deacons. I said, brother, we need to do a visit. And he said, good, pastor, where are we going? And I said, we're going to visit such and such a family. Good, they haven't had a visit for many years. Very good. I said, okay, pick you up at 7. So I picked him up at 7. And we drove there, and he said, you know, why are we visiting? I said, actually, brother, we're going to throw him out of the church tonight. What? It's okay, you just come along. So we got there, knocked on the door. Oh, pastor. Oh, good to see you. Come in. Thank you. Went in, sat down. Cup of tea? Oh, no, it'll be okay, thank you. You know, you recall that last week I said that, da-da-da-da-da. Yes. Well, you know what? Is it true that this week you were saying this and this and this and this to such and such? And they went. And I said, okay. You know, I'm really sorry, you're a lovely family, but you have to leave the church. I said, you can't stay here anymore. And they said, oh, and we talked about it, and they said, in the end, they said, oh, pastor, we're sorry, and then they didn't leave. We said, okay. But you say, why were you such, what? Listen to me. The future of the church was at stake. The future, you know what? The future of 15-year-old Nathan, how old were you? Don't contradict me. The future of 15-year-old Nathan Lloyd was at stake. The future of people who were going to come and get saved was at stake. It wasn't ever about me. It was about this city needs some walls because this people are vulnerable, and if you love this people, you've got to get some walls. So what we had to do was say the sins that had led to, you know, some struggles needed to be moved on, and it did. And it was the right thing to do. Now, don't be alarmed. I haven't shouted about an exit for at least a few years now, but you need to understand if you don't get it out, you just keep having the same result. So some of these churches that they have some nice people, you know, they'll often say, oh, you know, we're just not, and it's like we're not dealing with the essential problem of what's holding you back. The same sins that led to captivity are there. You can't have a church where the members are devouring the members and think that the blessings, the windows of heaven, the windows aren't heaven open. God's gone for a cuppa and He's turned you back to you. He'll be ready for you when you're ready. But you can't do that sort of thing and treat people badly, and you can't be a pastor and treat people badly. You don't do that and expect the blessing of God. So you have to make sure that those things are done. Let me do this. This principle is so true that it is not only seen in churches and individuals, it's seen in nations. Nations that don't have walls, remember we said the walls are the boundaries, the rules, the principles. Nations, countries that don't have that are in ruin. Do you know the problem with Africa? Is that Africa has so much corruption, Africa can't lift itself out of its own mire. You can throw billions of dollars to Africa, it's going to go down the gurgler. It's not going to get to the people who need it. What Africa needs is a new system. What Africa needs is a better understanding of what government means. Do you know the problem with Papua New Guinea right now? And we have blessed many dear friends up there. But they'll tell you what I'm saying is true. The country is not governing the country. There is so much corruption in the government that the walls are so broken down, that country can never rise to greatness. It's never going to. It can't. You say, well, they don't have the natural resources. They have many natural resources. They cannot govern themselves, is the problem. What I'm telling you is true with nations. You look at the little island of Singapore, which is an island state. Singapore has no natural resources. All Singapore has is people. And what happened in Singapore, Brother Sylvester, you're from Singapore, what happened in Singapore was that Lee Kuan Yew came along and he said, we're going to introduce some laws and some rules and change some things. And he started building walls, and what happened was the people started to believe in themselves again. And a pride took hold, and the nation started, because they had rules and principles and boundaries, and suddenly a walled city, and people who don't have a walled city are reproached. They're demoralized. You see that in the Bible. Nehemiah understood that. So Lee Kuan Yew said, we're going to introduce this, and a lot of people didn't agree with things he said. And it doesn't matter whether you agree or whether he didn't. He rebuilt some walls. And within those walls, prosperity came. No natural resources, and just said some things are going to change. He started cleaning up hygiene, all manner of things. Laws to do with social structure, laws to do with taking care of your family, incentives to take care of all these things. He started to shape a society by laws and rules and boundaries. And he was highly criticised for years. But, brethren, the fruit is there to see. Say what you will. Now, the present government is heading down a different course, but the fruit is there to see. It's true for nations. That's the path to greatness, is to construct the walls and to have that. Thankfully, in Australia, we still have a fairly good system. We largely are corruption-free. And we have a judiciary that mostly is independent, and we generally have good politicians, whatever you think of them. Generally, they're decent Australian people who do want the best for the country. And we don't always agree with what they do, and they have a different... But generally, we have some good things here. We have rules. You know, if you go through a red light, you're going to get the cameras. You're going to get booked. And we have some things in place that say everybody has to work together to abide by the rules. We're not going to have a chaotic country. Well, don't complain about the rules. Go to some places where there aren't any and see how it goes. We've enjoyed prosperity. Do you want to go to university? You can. Lucky you. Do you want to start with nothing and try to make your way to... You can. Others have, and you can. Do you want to have the right to go where you want to go today? You can. And we've got a great country. I love Australia. I love being Australian. I love the uniqueness of our character. And it's not without its blots. It's not without its, it's there. But, it's who we are. And we have a lot of great things. And these walls and boundaries that our nation has, they've been good to us. Be glad that we were colonised by the British and not the French or the Spanish. Is there any French or Spanish? But be glad that we were, because we inherited a good system from the British. We didn't inherit the bondage. We didn't look at the Philippines that was colonised by the Spanish. Just start looking around at some of it. Look at South America that was colonised by the Spanish. So we did okay. God has smiled on us. We have a good land. Thank God. But, and I'm not preaching on this tonight, if the sin starts breaking down our walls, we will lose everything we had. It is a cycle. My last statement is this, and I'll finish with this because already I really have come... Actually, this is let's move quick. Statement number 4 is this: the value of the walls is best understood by looking at the whole. When I was in Jerusalem, I had the wonderful opportunity to go to Jerusalem, and it was a tremendous blessing. When I was in Jerusalem, I got to see the walls that are there presently in close-up. You know, I touched them. But the best view is you can walk the walls from the top. Now, you look at any wall just in a piece, you may not highly esteem its value. But when you see the part the wall has with the whole, you understand its value. And this is what I'm saying about the boundaries, the principles, the laws, the testimonies, the commandments. You might pull one out and say, but what is that? But you have to look at it in the whole. You have to understand. If you come to church here and you only come one service a week, I'm always, you know, particularly if you just come to the same service. If you only come Sunday morning, you'll only ever see part of the view. You don't see the overall. If you only come Sunday night, I'm usually hitting issues. So you're going to get caught up on the issue thing. And you might think, well, is that what this church is, this wall? No, that's only a part of what this church is. You have to get the overall. And the more you're around, when you get the overall, I'm hoping everybody says, well, I can see value in what we do. I see the overall value. So don't look at a wall in part. You know, kids, don't complain about a rule at home. Understand it's part of a greater good. Understand that if it's there, there's a reason. And then the last thought is this, is that every walled city, and this statement is crucial, every walled city must have gates. Every city that God had anything to do with has gates. And the reason for that is this: the gates of the city give you the liberty to go within or to go without. And God never built a city without gates. In other words, you get to decide, do you want to be in God's rules or do you not? God never makes anybody against their will. So bring that down to our level. The institutions that we are involved in must have gates as well. If a church only has walls and not gates, it's a cult. If it tries to hold and force people into something and doesn't let them out and doesn't let them choose, it's a cult. It has to have gates that says it's up to you. You say this, look, this is who we are, these are our walls. Do you want to come in? Do you not want to come in? It's up to you. But the gates are here. They let you in, they let you out. And you've got to have that, because you've got to, God always had rules and laws and testimonies and commandments, but God always had liberty as well. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. So you've got to have liberty. Your family should not be, you said, Pastor, you talked about rules and laws and testimonies. Your family should not be an oppressive place. It should not be a place where there is no liberty. And it's even okay to reach the point where you say, look, this is what we do here, but it's up to you. I personally believe, and I've been criticised for this position over the years, which is shocking to understand. But people, I personally believe that if you're a teenager and you can't abide by the rules of your parents' home, that you just should go. That it's not fair to abide under their roof, eat their food, have their provision, and flaunt their rules. And if you had some decency and honour, you wouldn't even do that. But if you absolutely find that you're thoroughly incompatible with the rules of your home, as heartbreaking as it is, bye-bye. Because it has gates as well. If you come to the church and you say, look, this is not the kind of church I want to be in, you know, I don't, whatever reason, it's okay, there are gates. It's up to you whether you come or whether you go. Now, we want to put out the welcome mat outside our gates and say, welcome in. But we don't force, you know what I'm saying? I say to people when they come here, you just look, attend some services and you find out from God if you feel this is right for you. And if you don't feel it's right for you, you're not a wicked person, that's fine. It's somebody else that's probably better for you. It's okay. It's up to you. There's a liberty. Jesus said, I am the door. If any man enter in. Would you notice the if? It's up to you. He's saying, I want you to come, but you have to decide if you want to come. And that's the kind of thing we have to do. Let me conclude. Nations that have rules and boundaries and laws should have gates as well. A nation that only has walls and no gates is oppressive and likely to be communist or hyper-socialist or something like that. Nations have got to have liberties with laws. And that's the beautiful combination. Walls and gates. Laws and liberties together. That's what you want to have. In your own life, yes, introduce some principles in that. But have you ever met people who don't have any liberty for themselves? They're the people who are down on themselves. They're the people who live under a bondage of their own laws. And then they can't help it. They have to project that onto others as well. But when you have a certain liberty, you say, well, you know, it's okay. The Bible said, you know, righteous man falls 7 times, but he gets up again. That means that, you know, 7 times, you know, okay, you make a mistake, you get back up, it's okay. It's not like death. It's all right, you're working to get better. Okay, you were late today because you were tardy, you slept in, you're a sluggard. Don't worry, nobody's thinking that about you. But you were that way. Okay, you know what, it's not the end of the world. You hit the sermon where he happened to touch on people being late. He's not hounding you out of the church. He didn't see you come in out of the corner of his eye and just wanted to give you a little bit. No, nothing like that. It's okay, just take care of it. Work on it, get better next time. You don't need to come and pour your soul out into confession to Father Sehmish about, you know, why you were late. You don't need, you know, absolution from me. It's okay, brother, I understand. It happens to us all. God bless you, you know. You don't need to come and even tell me. Just take care of it yourself. Just work on it yourself. Oh, you know, I was just thinking he preached that message and we went on holidays and we didn't give our tithe. I need to tell him, no, you really don't. Let me live in blissful ignorance of who gives what in this church. I really enjoy it. I enjoy not knowing who gives what. That way I don't treat anybody any differently. Everybody gets it. If I want to come out blazing, there's no bulletproof vest handed out. That's it. You know what I'm saying? Everybody gets it. It's a good way to be. Walls and gates. Let's pray. We're done. Thank you. You've been very patient. Do we have a song, Brother Liam? Where's Brother Liam? Would you find something? Only first and last verse will be just fine. Father, help us. We want to get better and be more like Christ in every way. And thank you for the Word of God. Lord, what richness is in this book. What wisdom is contained here for life. What wisdom for nations is here. Please give us eyes to see it and ears to hear and a heart to receive. And again, Father, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. All right, good. Let's go ahead and